Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. Our coverage of Agatha All Along continues with Episode 6, Familiar by Thy Side, written by Jason Rostovsky and directed by, apologies if you haven't across this video, I've only ever read your name, I haven't heard it said, directed by Ganja Montero. As always, there is a blanket spoiler warning in place because I do these unscripted and may decide to talk about spoilers. If you do not wish to be spoiled, Agatha All Along streams on Disney+. And this is another fantastic episode. Admittedly, this is a step down from previous episodes. For me, it's just a matter of personal taste. And I forgot to plug in my laptop again. I am really bad at that. For me, it's just a matter of personal taste, but I liked what the previous episodes were doing more. And this is essentially just a recap episode. More on that in a little bit. But also, in this episode, I noticed that as much as I have been enjoying this series, which has been immensely, there has been something, I kind of noticed it too in the last episode we looked at, episode 5, and I talked about it a little bit, that's kind of bugging me, with the caveat that at the moment the series is unfinished. So while it may be a problem for me now, then by the time the series ends, the series might circle back around and fix it. We'll just have to see. So what is this episode? Well, after the reveal last week that the teen is Billy Kaplan, Billy Maximoff, Wiccan, I'm just going to call him Billy, we flash back to Billy's perspective. So this is his perspective on the events of the series up to this point. And after we get caught up, we get caught up to the present, and Billy strikes an uneasy alliance with Agatha for both of them to finish the road. Because, so long as they don't fight each other. Easier said than done with Agatha Harkness. But this episode is where Joe Locke really gets to shine. He had a really strong introduction in those early episodes, and then he was sidelined a little bit. He was just kind of there commenting on everything until episode 5, where we got the reveal. So this episode is very focused on Billy, and Joe Locke is fantastic. We also get a lot of answers to some of the questions we'd had, like, where did Billy come from? Which I will say I was completely wrong about. If I'm being honest, I was expecting multiverse shenanigans because the current saga of the MCU is the multiverse saga. But that's not what happened. As I said, this is kind of a recap episode showing events from Billy's point of view leading up to the present. It doesn't start at episode 1. Actually, it starts at the end of WandaVision. Billy Kaplan was a young man who recently was celebrating his bar mitzvah. On the way home, he and his parents notice, I should say they are from Westview's twin sister city, Eastview. On their way home, they notice the events of WandaVision wrapping up. Essentially, the dome Wanda placed over the town dissipating. And in their sort of clamor to watch what's going on, they get into a car accident in which Billy is killed. But mysteriously, he wakes up. Not knowing what's going on, having no memory of what happened. I'm just going to beat around the bush here and get right to the point. What seems to have happened is that Wanda's son, who, in the events of WandaVision, she seemingly created, as her spell over Westview was broken, the soul spirit of Wanda's son, Billy, entered Billy's, Billy is Wanda's son, William is William Kaplan. Billy's soul entered William's dead body. And, we get a really good montage of him trying to adjust to a normal life, trying to figure out who he is. Question for anyone who's watching the series. During this sequence, was de-aging technology used on Joe Locke? It kind of looked like it. Like right after he gets out of the hospital and goes to his room and looks at himself in the mirror, he looks really small and skinny. I don't know if it was just clever costuming tricks, the fact that Joe Locke kind of has a big head, or if he was actually de-aged. It's just, it looked off enough to notice it, is all I'm saying. And then, of course, we flash forward where Billy is still trying to figure out who he is and where he came from. Oh! I completely skipped over something, because it's one of the big answers in this, that this series had that set up. Who placed the sigil on Billy? Who prevented Billy from telling Agatha and others who he was? It was Lilia. At Billy's bar mitzvah, there was a tent for a fortune teller, and it was Lilia. She notices something disturbing, obviously at this point we know what she saw, when reading his palm. So she placed the sigil on him to protect him, and as an effect, she forgot all about it. Like Agatha said in the previous episode, sigils also affect the witch who cast them, and they can only be broken when they aren't needed anymore. We also see Billy, without knowing it, interact with other members of the coven. For example, after Billy's soul enters his body and he kind of adjusts to his new life, we see he kind of regularly watches Jennifer Kale on presumably YouTube. Right after the car crash, the cop that Billy's parents flagged down, the cop that responded, was Alice. So we're kind of coming full circle here. Like I said, the bulk of this episode is focusing on Billy's point of view. And, right before we cut back to the present day, which is where this episode ends, we get to the first, sorry. This episode does a lot, and I am just recalling it in bits and pieces as I talk. While trying to figure out what happens, Billy is going online, trying to figure out what happened with Westview, and no one will talk about it. Except one person we meet on Reddit. And it's Evan Peters. You remember that gag they did? Wanda's brother Pietro was killed in Age of Ultron, and as a coping mechanism, he showed up. Except in the MCU, Pietro was played by Aaron Taylor Johnson. But in Fox, in the X-Men movies, he was played by Evan Peters, and it was Evan Peters who showed up. But he tells him about how traumatizing the events of Westview were for him. He's one of the few people we've seen to see how messed up the events of Westview were. Because remember in episode 1, when Agatha finally breaks Wanda's spell, her neighbors were just talking about it, essentially, saying like, yeah, we kind of knew what was happening. We don't talk about Wanda, but we were just kind of letting you go through the motions because we didn't know what else to do. It was pretty casual how they had adjusted to it. And then, of course, there was Sharon. But yeah, no, seeing Ralph Boner, Evan Peters' character, it sees how badly it messed him up. There was a bit of a course correction, here, maybe a bit of an overcorrection. I don't know. I'm not getting into the debate because with the MCU, there is a bit of discourse, a bit of debate on Wanda's accountability. She was grieving, she was going through this terrible thing, and she acknowledges that. She accepted that. But, there are some fans who can agree with her that she went too far and kind of forgive her as she struggles with her grief. And then there are people who don't. There are people who still absolutely demand, and fans, I should say, not characters in the MCU, fans watching. There are fans who still demand Wanda's head on a pike. This is one of the major problems with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And where I feel like this episode does a bit of an overcorrection is that Ralph, Evan Peters, says what Agatha did during the events of WandaVision, at least to him in his regard, was so much worse than what Wanda did. Again, just an observation. It's not a debate I am getting into. I will just say, because grief and the way it manifests, it's a very delicate topic. Everyone processes it differently. Everyone handles it differently. What Wanda went through was very harrowing, and it played havoc with her powers. Anyway, so after meeting Ralph, Billy decides to go to Westview to seek out Agatha. Because, he started learning and researching about the Witch's Road. And here, I will build up to this. The reason Billy wants to go on the Witch's Road, he doesn't want power or anything like that. If he survived, he wants to see if Tommy survived as well. He is looking for Tommy. He's, he can feel his presence, probably a twin telepathy thing. He just has no idea how to find him or where he is. And that's why he sought out Agatha. And that's really where we end. We get this, we jump back to the present. We get this tense confrontation between Billy and Agatha, about this debate on what power is for, why they both want to walk the road. They'll still walk together, but Billy doesn't trust her. Fair enough. And then we get to sort of the issue that's been building up with me about this series. Much as I love it, I still thoroughly enjoy this series. After escaping what Billy did to her in the previous episode, Agatha mentions that Jen and Lilia are dead. I don't like how this series is handling its side characters. Aside from Agatha and Billy, and presumably Rio, after the trial ended and Alice was killed in episode 5, when the Coven left the trial, Rio vanished, and she was not in this episode at all. In fact, when we got the flashbacks to episode 1 from Billy's perspective, when we got the scene where Agatha was talking to Rio, we didn't see, in her house before Billy broke in, we didn't see Rio, but that's neither here nor there. As I was saying, I don't like how this series is treating its side characters. Basically, they're there to serve a narrative function, and that's it. They aren't really being developed, and if they are, it isn't really being done properly. Like I said in episode 4, it feels like the events surrounding Alice's curse and the details of it are half-baked, She got what she wanted on the road. She knew why her mom wrote her version of the ballad and she was able to make peace with her mother. And also free herself from the curse that's been plaguing her family. But what exactly was that curse? Who placed it on her? Well, Alice's story is done, so none of that matters. And it was very similar with Jen and Lilia, I'll start with Jen. Jen said someone bound her powers, and we get a little bit of that in her hallucination in episode 3. We see a little glimpse of that. But then, and similar with Lilia, in episode 3, we see her hallucination about what happened with her. But that's all we get. We know why they're walking the road to undo these events that we kind of got glimpses of. We don't know what these events are. And now they're dead. Because now that Billy's powers have awakened, they serve no purpose. Again, like I said, that's just where we're at right now. But we still have 3 episodes left, so we might course correct and come back to this. Yeah, episode 6 is good, like I said. It's easily the highlight for Joe Locke in particular. It's really interesting to see this new POV on events we've already seen leading up to this point, but it wasn't as good as the previous episodes, and it just manifested an issue I've kind of been noticing building up throughout the series that I hope gets fixed before it ends. We have 3 episodes left, 2 videos, because like the 2-episode premiere, Disney Plus is going to be doing a 2-episode finale. But those are just my thoughts. Have you seen episode 6? What are yours? Start a conversation in the comments below. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Click the bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload. And in the description box below, you will find the link to my socials where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and I'll see you guys next time.